Hello, I'm Brian, and this is my wife Christina. I am Dad Say No More, among a couple other things. Um, we've been together for soon to be 20 years in December here, and we are currently raising seven children. Our oldest is 19, our youngest is six. We've kind of grown together throughout the years. We started out pretty young. My wife was 19 when you had 20 when we had the first one, right? 19?
18.
19. And I was 20, just about to turn 21. Um, and then and during that time I was also in the military, and I think we started out with the same idea that parenting was going to be this like 50-50 like adventure, but with the military we soon found out that that wasn't really how our relationship was going to work. So it took us a few years to kind of get our groove into it, but I just wanted to talk about like the idea of how you kind of go into these relationships with these ideas, but it's not until you start growing together that you really kind of get somewhere, especially when it comes to being a parent.
Hmm.
So um, why don't we start with you sharing like some of your ideas of what you thought it was going to be like when we first got together?
It's a long time ago.
I know, and we look far different from then. We've we've both grown a lot older in both our mindset, our body, our pain levels.
Yeah, I don't know. I do remember our first move, like after we were married and we PCS to El Paso. I think at that point, we had a baby and um
So I think it's really hard to kind of think back to those years because we've gotten a lot better over the years. Those first years were pretty rough. That first year in El Paso, not only were we kind of like in a culture shock coming from Wisconsin and, where it's green and people are of one type to a place where like El Paso, where there's so much bigger than anywhere we lived before. Um, there were multiple, like, if you want to talk about cultures, there's literally other foreigners that would come across every day from the border. And it was a different way of like being treated and a different place to kind of act. We just didn't fit in so well that first year. And I was additionally going to like my AIT school there, which also made it hard because I really didn't have time other than to study and work really hard towards getting my nursing license at that
yeah.
point. So I mean, there wasn't really a lot of time where we kind of got that quality time in that first year. But that first year also made us grow quickly. We had to learn how to like get along because we're so far away from our parents and because we're so far away from everything else that we consider a support structure. We had to learn how to like rely on each other. In a lot of ways, I think that was probably the greatest gift we had for our marriage because we knew at that point that, I mean, the only choice was to either end it in completely separate ways or try to make it all work out. And we knew that we wanted to make it work out after that first year. I mean,
Yeah, I think that was a benefit. I even see that with our kids now that are older girls that are in relationships and how they really don't come to us to help them fix their relationship problems and they really try to work that out with their significant other. So I think that's important. Even though that they still live here and they don't live far away, that value or that scenario in which you don't live by your parents or you don't really lean on your parents for that, because in a relationship, the more you talk bad about your significant other or your spouse, you tend to develop this that you're creating this image for your parents and it's not necessarily a good image. And so I think it's important that you don't talk bad about them. So I'm thankful that girls don't do that.
and there was no going off and gathering allies and then there being fights among multiple people. When we had disagreements, it was just between the two of us, and
Right.
we had to like come to resolutions. And I think our children do reflect that now in their relationships because when they are in disagreements, they don't go out and gather allies. They don't go out and tell everyone what's going on. They learn pretty young that some stories are not yours to tell.
Hmm.
Some stories are meant to be lived out and not shared with everyone else. And part of that adventure of growing together is learning to communicate and overcome those obstacles. And we set a good example, not necessarily because it was what we wanted to do. It was kind of what we had to do in order to survive.
Hmm.
Um, I mean, and there was some rough moments, right? Christina had an expectation based on what she grew up with. I had an expectation based on what I grew up with. I didn't necessarily want my children to live in my family home. Christina didn't want her children to live in her family home, but we had to kind of grow together in order to build what we thought was the best parts of each family and bring them together. But we had to learn how to like bring in like our own strengths for the weaknesses that we grew up with and our
Mhm.
own like style. In our parenting, those first probably like 10 years is far different than our parenting now. We both have grown a lot in maturity, emotionally, physically, mentally, socially, all those elements we've grown. Emotionally, I was pretty um, apathetic, I would say, a lot of times. Like, I learned to shut off a lot of emotions growing up in my house. I mean, my family was great. I grew up in a poor situation, but at the same time, you learn that you learn how to not deal with problems or feelings just by simply not dealing with them. And that's kind of like the path I started off with. So I had to start learning how to like recognize other people's emotions and recognize how to like do better with that. And I think Christina on the other end, I mean, her family was always big into sharing emotions. So and sometimes she would lay way more emotions on me than I was ready for, and it would always kind of come to a head at some point where we had to like work on it.
Right. Now we're just some big emotional mess of a family because our children have big emotions. But with that, you were gone a lot, so they were allowed to have big emotions because I could handle their big emotions.
Yeah, I was gone a lot those
And they
first couple of
always
years.
had that stable person to support them in their big emotions.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that was part of the journey, right? Is going from that those expectations in the beginning to like what our reality was. Um, so my main audience for this channel is fathers, and my wife, of course, been here for 19 years. Let's try to work through like what are your expectations were in the beginning for what a dad would look like, and like some of the ways that you thought I kind of grew over the years, and what your expectation is.
So I think a lot of it was that fairy tale idea of a spouse that, you know, in no parenting, I can only say from my experience, like my expectation, and then ultimately what we chose what was best for us. And so that's not necessarily what is best for anybody else. But my expectation, I think, was just more fairy tale. Um, Getting up with the babies and helping with that, which totally didn't make sense because you had to go to work the next morning and I could stay home. So it was very, probably just that fairy tale of like, with the babies, help around the house, and you were in school or you were working 12, 13, 14-hour shifts. And so I think it took a lot of time for me to realize that it's not that you didn't want to be there, it's just you physically could not be there. And then, when you're in the army or any sort of military or even a traveling job, you're gone, you move, um, you're gone, you're put on assignment. So you necessarily weren't there. So it was better for me just to be able to do it all myself. Um, and rely on you in the areas where like I could rely on you.
So that was your expectation, and then the reality kind of hit you that I couldn't be the fairy tale father. I couldn't be there all the time because I had other responsibilities I had to take care of. And for the majority of our marriage, it was my responsibility to be the so-called traditional breadwinner, and you kind of taking on the role as being um, the kind of like mother hen or the house mother or
Well, yeah, because that was something that we decided on, that it was important. You give up one type, you give up some things to do other things, right? And so for us, for me to be home and give the kids stability was much more important than having more income. And so we just learned to navigate that. I mean, we gave up some things, but we were still able to make a nice life for ourselves and the kids. And
yeah, and that'll be a future video when we talk like how we managed to like live off one income when most people need two incomes in today. Even when I was enlisted, a young enlisted soldier, we still managed. It wasn't very comfortable all the time, but we learned how to like make money kind of work for us. Our income at one point was below poverty. I mean, we qualified for every type of food stamp and everything else, but we only ever really used WIC over the years, and that was more because WIC really wanted us to use them more than it was for
Yeah,
us.
WIC is like one of those misconception programs, is like they're already allotted so much a year. So if you're in that income bracket and you don't use it, I mean that money's already set aside.
Yeah,
Um,
I think what people don't realize with programs like WIC, it's kind of like the government budget system, where if you don't use that money, a lot of times you can lose it. So if you have that money set aside for so many people that live in your like area or
mhm,
your district who are fits that standard, that income level that they're looking for, well, they if you don't get 100% of them, well, the state's going to turn around and say, well, you're not being effective with the money we are giving you, so they take the money back.
right.
So in that sense, WIC was it really did help us. I mean, it probably gave us a lot more cheese and milk than we probably would have ate naturally, even
Yeah.
being from
And we
Wisconsin.
really used it, not really with the first two. We didn't really use it with Leviticus.
And we didn't really ever feel like we needed to get that help. But that was a whole money management section that we'll go discuss. Okay, let's go from the expectations of where you were at in the beginning to what's your expectations and what a good dad looks like.
I think my expectation changed over the years, in with our seasons of life, right? So, at one point in our lives, we had 7 kids under the age of 10 or 9. And so that expectation was, um, you know, definitely like more hands on stuff just because of where we were in our lives. So, holding babies, helping babies, changing diapers. Um, I think the one thing that never changed was just um, you being there for them emotionally. Um,
I think around that time is when I really started focusing on not necessarily how much time I'm spending with the kids, but making sure that the moments that I was spending with them was the
it was impactful because, sometimes you only had so much time if you were between PCSs or between assignments or between, moves. Sometimes it just involved, you know, really like carving out specific times with each child, like taking them out for their birthday lunch, their breakfast, and um, just making that super special. Um, Not doing big flashy things, but just trying to really engage in like family game night or going out for pizza or doing movie night at home or going to the movies, and just having like those special events with them that weren't huge. I think,
like those everyday special events. Not necessarily that I did them every day, but they weren't things that you would think of like big vacations or anything like that.
right.
It was small meals, sneaking one of my kids out for one-on-one dinners or one-on-one breakfasts.
I think
Uh,
one they talk about a lot is like after I like went when we lived in Missouri, is like late night. And you guys would like sit out by the fire and you guys would have like goofy conversations that I would probably roll my eyes to. Like they talk about those things. And so those are really special, especially to our older ones. And now that, our littler ones are getting a little bit older, like they're starting to kind of pull into like those, like when you sit and you play a game with them, because they really enjoy games. Um, or if you just, like you said, you sneak a kid out, and or if you're out and you're like, hey, let's go grab a snack.
yeah, I think a lot of that is just being present for the small moments, and then when you have the extra time for those small moments, to take making it to something a little bit more special.
Yes.
Um, you'd be surprised how much just stopping at a fast food restaurant and going inside and just sitting there and talking to them can really just have a big impact. So, kind of like as I grew as a leader inside the military, I kind of learned some lessons there. And one of the lessons I kind of learned about was in the Seven Habits. They talked about the whole piggy bank, right? An analogy like emotional piggy bank, where you put small deposits in and builds up over time. You can put in larger deposits, but it kind of seems like the smaller deposits over time always end up building up more interest than the larger deposits do later on. So, in the same sense, you also have withdrawals, and you learn how to like try to maximize the amount of deposits you put in versus the amount of withdrawals you put in. And there are some huge withdrawals. Like if I did something that was really hurtful to somebody, that could take away a lot of their emotional feelings towards me. But at the same time, um, the small deposits, like constantly yelling or fighting or those type of things, also like removes you. And with that concept, we kind of learn those small things that we do with our kids, the small meals or the small moments, they kind of just add up over time. So we focus more on just finding the small times, especially with my schedule and never really having a consistent schedule when I was in the military. They could call you up anytime and say, hey, we need you for 12, 13 hours, 14 hours. And there's not much you can say because there's always somebody of rank, of power over you. And that's part of the job. It's part of the career path. There's just not a lot of freedom with it. I mean, they kind of like told us where we're going to live, and
When
um,
you're gonna live there, and how long you have to get there, how long
yeah,
you have to get a house.
you can be told you're going to do one job, show up to any place, and they turn around and say, "No, we don't want you to do that job. We want you to do this other job." And sometimes it was good jobs, sometimes it was bad jobs, sometimes it was working lots of nights, around the clock. I mean, it just it was that in itself helped us grow.
Yeah.
So, but now that we're talking about what her expectations were, for now, and then the other question I had to follow up with that is, what do you see a good father being now that you've grown up a little bit? Now that I would say, well, we're 12 years away from finishing our parenting journey until they're all reach adulthood, but we've also been parenting for 19 years, so we're about 60% of the way through our parenting.
No. So sad. Sure you don't want to have a baby?
No, no, I'm about to retire. I'm actually in my final leave before retirement, and I do not want to prevent me. I would like to actually be able to stop working someday. And part of the retirement, this thing I kind of look forward to is being able to spend more time with the family and having more freedom, saying yes and no when I am going to work and what I'm going to do. And if this is ever successful, maybe I do this more and
You
less.
just bring a baby along for the ride. So you do with the rest of them. No, you don't need a
I don't
baby.
want to do diapers again. I don't want to do all that. I love my wife, and I would try to give her just about anything I can for her. But another baby is just not something I look forward to.
7 is a good number.
I would have stopped at three if it was up to me, but
Yes, and then we had twins, and then we had one more. And we had another. So
yeah.
we stopped at 7.
And we'll talk about that story. We'll share more of our stories as we go along, but for now, it's more about just kind of introducing ourselves and the idea of what a good father is.
My expectation now, I think just being there emotionally for the kids, being there physically for the kids, um,
Being present.
being present. But that's the big stuff, right? You know, you coach, you go to their games, you support them, you encourage them, you never tell them any of their ideas are bad ideas or that they can't accomplish them. Um, but you do very good about, okay, like if this is a goal you have or if this is ultimately what you want to do, let's see how we get there. And so you're really good at that with them. Um,
The growth in teaching mindsets that you kind of grow up into, right?
yeah,
So my goal is not so much to tell my children their ideas are bad, but I try to explain to them their options and their the challenges they're going to face if they try to go down that path. And but I still let them make their own decisions, and I will help them along their pathway. Even if I kind of don't like their ideas, I do my best to kind of like support them in that decision path.
yeah,
The main point that we're trying to get at, or the thing that we want to share with the world, is that you know your expectations in the beginning are going to have to be changed as you grow a little bit older together. And that's the great secret to marriage in itself, is learning how to grow old together in a way that you can support each other. And whether it's in being parents together or just being part of the journey together,
hmm,
those making memory moments.
yeah,
Um, and entering into a new chapter in our life, there's even going to be adjustments that we're going to have to face in the future, and we're going to have to continue to grow,
yeah,
and we're going to have to continue to be that way. And if you're a new father out there, or if you're a father out there who's halfway through and just looking at the differences of raising a young child versus a teenager, which can be a very big challenge in itself.
Oh
Uh,
yeah.
going from the moment where they look at you as an idol to the moment that they look at you as the opposition, yeah,
Yes.
opposing team.
Yes.
And it
But we're
seems,
rounding the corner. So we've got them kind of, and I have kids have never like looked at us like we were stopping them or we were in their way. Um, but we kind of have like three phases going on, right? So like our oldest is like out of the house and doing her thing. And so she's like kind of like wrapping back around, like we're not so much like mom, dad, but we've kind of like developed like this friendship with her. And then we have one that's about ready to graduate high school. And so she's kind of starting to like turn that corner where it's like more of a friendship, but still seeks advice from mom and dad. And then our son, who is 15, he's kind of in this like, I just want to learn to do it my way. And so sometimes I feel like we're like little roadblocks because he wants to be able to go do his stuff, but he still has to get permission. And then, we've got four under the age of 10. And so they are still very much, mom and dad are like the coolest people on our planet.
well, dad
Well,
mostly. But
I mean, our 10-year-olds, I mean, they did just turn 11. So our 11-year-olds, I mean, they're starting to be like, really? That's embarrassing. So,
is that whole, and I've done a little series on the psychosocial development, right? Was that ages where they start looking to kind of leave the family and start to have their own independence. And that is actually a great part of growth. It's something that most children don't get in today's world. And they kind of like have this longer childhood because they don't learn to be independent at those ages. But it's important to like foster that while trying to keep them safe, but not being overbearing at the same time where they don't build that confidence in themselves and they don't gain that the ability to like be on their own.
yeah.
And every child is so different that every child has their own learning curve. Since I got your attention now, if you've been watching the videos I put up so far, you notice that there's some things I do that are just goofy or playful. And I know some of the world probably thinks of it as me just being childish, but how has that helped or hurt our marriage over the years?
I don't think it hurts it. I'm too serious. So I need that balance of fun in my life. Otherwise, I would have no life.
Do you think I was always like that, or did I become more of that as I recognized that you needed that in life?
I think you recognize that as we've gone further on in marriage. I mean, you were always goofy, but it changed, I think, as we grew. That you recognize that if you weren't goofy, I probably wouldn't laugh.
Um, So I would say our beginning of our marriage we were far more serious with each other, and that's kind of the point I was trying to make is that some of the videos I've labeled, for instance, one of the videos I label is the great keys that, or is great secret to marriage. It wasn't so much that I'm goofy or that I do silly things. It's more that video is more designed to like bring in just a little bit of attention and critical thinking to the idea that my wife is somebody who needs a little bit of goofiness in her life. And those little small things, those little moments where she's like rolling her eyes or
Mm-hmm.
she's not really laughing, but inside you know that she understands what how silly that is and how much it helps the kids like find some humor in life. Those are the things that she kind of needed to help her from feeling stressed out all the
And I
time.
think it's great because our children are not, I mean, we have like one that is very logical, but he's still very witty. But it has definitely helped our children to not have, yeah, like, I mean, I don't think I have bad personality. I just am very serious a lot of the time. And so I think it's helped our kids to develop, I mean, their seriousness and some stuff, but they've also developed like fun, witty characters,
Yeah, I think it helps.
personality.
I think it helps build some resiliency too,
Yeah.
because when you're very serious and everything's very stressful in life, especially when you're in a life like the military life, if you don't find some way to kind of like blow off some of the stress or blow off some of the steam, it can eat you up inside and it can terrorize your internally and then it can affect your external life, like your
Right.
relationships.
And it definitely helps us like just get through life, right? I mean, there's definitely ups and downs, but I think being able to laugh about things is a lot easier. I mean, I don't think
Yeah.
we get so frazzled over anything anymore.
I think one thing I kind of humor wise have gotten better about is recognizing the safe zones of humor too with my wife. I would say my younger years, I was a lot more raunchy, which my wife did not appreciate. So growing into the
Mm-mm.
dad jokes and growing into jokes that she can listen to and not feel embarrassed, even though I do embarrass her sometimes. She doesn't feel embarrassed by the actual jokes, maybe more embarrassed that I'm willing to act that way in public. Um,
Yep.
but those are all the small things she loves about me. And the real secret to marriage in that video, the real thing is recognizing the needs of your other one and not necessarily just giving to them in a way that is very blank or very straightforward, but giving to them in small ways throughout their whole life, making those small deposits as you go along. What many people in the world may see as withdrawals because they wouldn't like that done to them. My wife has grown to really enjoy, and those become deposits. It's that building of a relationship, kind of one dad joke at a time.
Mm.
So yeah, raising children, I mean, it's a learning experience, and every step of the way, you got to learn along with them, um, and that's the big part of doing this. Don't be afraid to try new things. Don't be afraid to like go out there and look for advice or help. Don't be afraid to change things up. Matter of fact, the more you change throughout life, the more you adjust to what is needed in life, the better you're probably going to be, the more resilient you're going to be as you go along in this path. Um, yeah, continue to grow. We will continue to grow. The stuff I'm sharing on the YouTubes, those are all things that have worked for me. They may not work for you, they may not work for your family, but at the same time, I'm going to share what I've learned over the years, and I encourage you to go out there and share what you're going to learn. With that, at some point, I would like to start doing interviews with other fathers and whether it be through Zoom calls or something along those lines, where we can talk about the lessons that you have learned as fathers throughout your life in order to make it for a better family. I guess one last thing I kind of want to talk about is the Care.Grow.Share.Build model, right? The Care.Grow.Share.Build is something that I came up with one day in the gym. I was trying to find a way to like describe to myself or a mantra for myself for what my life mission was or what my mission statement was. And I came up with four small words: care, grow, share, build. And the idea is that I care about people. And then because I care about people, I look for opportunities to grow myself so that as I grow, I can share with others in order to build a better future. And that's like my little elevator pitch, as you would call it in the business world, where I try to explain what my why is. Thank you for listening to us. Thank you for my wife for being part of this video. I'm going to try to interview each of my children as we go along, try to get you to introduce my family to the world. Let them have their own say and their own opinions about what it is like to have a father like me. Kind of let them share with you like the things that their advice to fatherhood, and hopefully we can all grow together. This is my attempt to share with you everything I learned, and together we can build a better world.
That's good.